All right, well, in the interest of everybody's time, I'm going to get started. And since I'm recording today's presentation, we'll be able to share it out with the rest of our community in a little bit. Welcome to our rescheduled December Principals Coffee here on January 8th, 2021. Happy New Year to all of you. Today's agenda, I'm going to be discussing first the reasoning for our district postponing last night's board meeting. The anticipated announcement we're expecting to hear from the governor's office related to his Safe School for All return plan, and then briefly talking about the rescheduled board meeting for next week with some additional updates. I'm going to go over the district communication that was sent out on the 17th of December, kind of updating the entire community on some of the decisions that have been made by district leadership related to our instructional model moving forward as we kind of balance all of the different needs that our community has at this time. I'm going to talk briefly about the cohorting process and update you on our process, where we are kind of with the building of the cohorts. I'm going to talk about some of the feedback I've received from the community from our survey back in the late fall, and then also just some of the different conversations I've had with different families and parents throughout the last few months and some of the adjustments we're going to be making in response to some of that feedback. And then just kind of continuing to talk about what our distribution plans moving forwards are, and then addressing the 3 questions I received from the community ahead of time. Again, at the conclusion of today's meeting, after I've kind of gone through the presentation and answered the questions that were submitted ahead of time, I'm going to stop the recording, and then any of the members who are community members who are on the call who would like to jump on and ask out any other additional questions, I'm happy to do so. So welcome. So returning to Bagby. So as all of you are kind of aware, last night's board meeting was in fact canceled. And the reason, sorry, I shouldn't say canceled, it was postponed until next Thursday. And the reason it was postponed is because we are, as educators, anticipating an announcement from the governor's office related to some updates in the conditions and expectations, and also some of the additional resources and funding schools might be getting in order to make bringing kids back to school a reality. And so the board felt, and just Dr. Andrews felt, that it was a little premature to host a board meeting last night if the conditions are going to be changing significantly based on this announcement from the governor's office. At this point, I don't have any specifics about what the governor intends to share out. I do know that in late December, he did publicly share that there was going to be incentives, I believe up to about $2 billion worth of funding that would be going to schools for bringing kids back in the near term. So I anticipate it will be him kind of laying out his plans for how that money can be allocated in getting kids back to school in a safe fashion. So please make sure that you're paying attention to your communications from the district. There will be another invite sent out for next Thursday's board meeting. So on campus, I continue to receive different questions from families about when on-campus instruction will begin. And as you are, most of you are aware, we are currently in the purple tier here in Santa Clara County. And that actually prevents us from opening within the purple tier. And so what we are waiting for is Santa Clara County to enter into the COVID-19 infection rate red tier for 14 days, meaning that the county itself needs to remain in the tier for 14 days with decreasing or stabilizing infection rates. One of the things that I'll share out is that our reopening is no longer going to be tied to a specific calendar date. In previous announcements, as we've kind of attempted to bring kids back at different points in the year, they were tied specifically to reopening dates. In fact, we were anticipating being able to reopen a number of months ago on the 11th of January for some of our students next week. But what we're going to be doing now is not tying it to a specific calendar date, and instead solely tying it to the conditions within Santa Clara County. But I also need to say that with a grain of salt, and that the reality is there's a possibility that today's announcement from Governor Newsom about his Safe Schools for All plan might adjust the conditions for students being able to return. I just don't know exactly what he plans to announce, and if that will either accelerate our return to campus or continue along kind of the similar trajectory we're currently on, waiting for a return in red. But I will be coming back to the community. I'll mention this later in my presentation. I will be coming back to the community in a week or two, maybe towards the end of January, and giving another principal's coffee as an update, not only just for our January principal's coffee, but also just update because the conditions continue to change so dramatically, and because I don't have any of the nuts and bolts of what the plan from the governor will be for today. I want to make sure that after the board meeting next Thursday, and after the governor's announcement, and after we've had kind of time to digest the implications for the Safe Schools for All plan, that I come back and update the community. So I will be giving another principal's coffee in the upcoming few weeks. So on the 17th of December, you should receive the communication from the district office, in particular from Dr. Andrews and Lynn Nguyen, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services. And in that communication, they kind of outlined what our instructional model will be moving forward. In early December, we surveyed the community about families' comfort level with a return to in-person instruction in the red tier, based on the feedback we received from the community and also from our teachers. We had to kind of weigh out a variety of different considerations, and out of that came the decision to move forward with a particular instructional model. And so I kind of want to lay out some of the larger chunks of what that plan is and what kind of the implications are. So first, class placement will not change for your student. One of the things that, in looking at the numbers of families who were uncomfortable with the return in red, and then just in general, what is best for kids during these uncertain times, is to provide as stable of an environment for them as possible. And so CSD prioritized, Cambrian School District prioritized making sure that students can remain with their teacher that they've grown to know over the past 5 months, and their classmates, and trying to make sure that we have some level of stability provided for them all. So we are not going to be reorganizing as a district or reorganizing as a school to accommodate families who want to stay out of in-person instruction during the red tier. And we're not going to be changing teachers or classes. So what that means is we need to kind of shift how we're going to actually do instruction so that we are accommodating for families who are ready to come back in the red tier and when we can first open our doors, and those other families who might not be comfortable with the return during the red tier, the orange tier, or the yellow tier. And so what the district has kind of elected to do, and this isn't the official term, but this is what a lot of districts are kind of calling it now. This model is called, we'll call it rooming and zooming. So you'll have certain students who are going to physically come to campus into their room, and then there's going to be other students who remain at home and continue to Zoom. So during their assigned AM cohort time, so you all remember that we will be returning to school for in-person instruction on a hybrid model, which means that 2 days a week, either Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, your child will, if you elect, will come to school in the morning for in-person instruction. So your child will be assigned to a cohort either Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. During that assigned time, if you are comfortable with your child coming to school and you want them to physically be here for the interactions that we all know take place at school, for the routine of walking to campus, for all those things that we know that bringing kids back to campus benefits them, you can do that, and that your child would then be a roomer. But there's going to be some families who aren't comfortable bringing their kids back in the red tier or in the orange tier, but we don't want to disconnect them from their teachers and their classmates. And so what they're going to have the option of is continuing to Zoom in during their assigned cohort time. So again, some students during their assigned cohort time in the mornings of Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, some are going to physically come to school Some are actually going to join their teachers and their peers via Zoom. In the afternoon, our hybrid model kind of lays out that at lunchtime, our students who are assigned cohort for that day, that Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday cohort, will shift home at lunchtime. And all students are going to have some level of instruction and support during the course of the afternoon during Zoom. So following the lunch transition on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, all students will have opportunities via Zoom for live instruction, social interaction, culture building with their teacher and their classmates. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about what that specifically looks like. Just as you all, just so if you have questions, I'm going to be sending this out as a PDF a little bit later. And if you are interested in actually seeing what the hybrid model is, it is in fact linked here. So you can click on here. It will take you to the district's communication on the 17th, and you can kind of go through the communication that Dr. Andrews and Mr. Nguyen sent out. So cohort placement and our weekly schedule. So as I've kind of communicated in the past, we had really all, we had set out to build cohorts and inform families prior to winter break. Then we got additional directives about how our students who receive special education services should be kind of evaluated for their cohort assignment. And so we needed to kind of put a pause on that process and go back to the drawing board and kind of redraft our cohorts, with the foundation being those students who need those legally mandated special education supports. So I've met with our SPED team here at school. We have completed those students being assigned to either a Monday, Tuesday, a Thursday, or a Friday cohort. I've reached out to our second consideration, which are our combination teachers. We have 4 of them who are teaching multiple grade levels, to receive their input about how they want to structure their combo classes as we transition to the hybrid model. And now our last remaining steps, 3 and 4, are the actual assignment of the siblings of all of those students, either in special education or combo classes, to the same cohort as their sibling, so that families aren't having to make multiple trips during the course of the week and can make one trip with all of their children. Next week at our staff meeting, I'm allocated time for our teachers to then basically look at our students, the students who have previously been placed, and continue to build their cohorts off of that. Teachers are going to have input about how to best structure the 2 cohorts, but the foundation that we've already laid out with our students with IEPs and special education services and the combination classes, those are kind of set in stone, and now the teachers are going to build off of that. So one of the questions I did receive was kind of, what is the schedule going to look like for a return? And as I kind of alluded to, we're going to be returning back in the hybrid schedule. Again, it is linked here in both of these hyperlinks, and in the PDF that I share out later, you'll be able to access it. You'll click it, it'll take you to the district's PDF that was sent out and board approved a couple of months ago, in which some students will be coming. Some students will be assigned to a cohort for instruction in the morning, either a Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, and their families have the option for them to come to school or to Zoom into their class. And then all students will be having a lunch break. And then after that, we have synchronous learning opportunities for both cohorts via Zoom. So again, if you have questions, feel free to check out that link. But just in terms of what the day-to-day schedule is going to look like for your kid. So the parameters have been established, as I just talked about, in the hybrid schedule. The district has laid out what the kind of the structures are for our teachers, but teachers, as they always are given the professional latitude about how their instructional day is going to be structured within those parameters. So at the beginning of the day, you will still expect to see a whole class check-in, and at the end of the day, probably some sort of wrap-up. You're going to see a blend of whole class instruction, small strategic grouping, and then the teachers also are going to have input. As I said before, they're going to have that input at our staff meeting next week about how they want to structure their cohorts. And based on the survey that we sent out to the community in early December, some teachers have very few students whose families aren't comfortable with the return while in the red tier. we have some teachers who have quite a few. And so we are giving them the professional discretion to kind of determine how they want to structure their class and assign students to the cohorts. Do they want Zoomers who are just going to be joining their class via Zoom to be jumping in both cohorts so that their numbers are separated? Or do they want to allocate do they want to allocate all of their Zoomers to a particular cohort? And that's where the kind of the professional discretion comes in. So there are some of those details still to be worked out, but teachers are going to have a say and an input based on what they think is best for their students. And so that's just wanted to update you on how that will all be structured. So in mid to late fall, we sent out a community survey about what was working, what wasn't working. And one of the kind of consistent threads through the comments was, one, students are missing out on the biggest concern that families have, were that students were missing out on their social opportunities, socializing, interactions with peers, interaction with adults. Additionally, one of the areas that was of concern was just the absence in this model of instruction of extracurriculars. And so what I've kind of done is gone back to our teachers. We've kind of problem solved, come up with some different ideas, and also worked with some of our home and school club organizations to work through how we're going to make this a more robust conclusion to the year. So one of the things that we wanted to do is bring back art to our students' experience. I've worked with our coordinator, Kaylin Caulfield, about kind of working through how it is that we could potentially get art into students' hands and get some of these art projects set and ready to go for family pickups, and then have them be able to be completed at home. So that's one thing that we're working on. Additionally, I reached out to our coordinator, Mr. Rob Ernst of our Makers Space, Makers Club, and we're working similarly on some take-home makers activities. This was a really, really successful program last year where we had lots of parent volunteers coming in, students doing a variety of different makers activities in our tank, really learned about the design thinking process and how iteration is super important in so many aspects of our lives, but also in industry. And so we wanted to figure out how we can continue that for our students in these strange times, but at home. So Rob and I are working together to kind of develop some projects for pickup here at home that families can complete with their students at home, in hopes of kind of continuing to build off of the foundation we started last year. Next, one of the things that I've had conversations with families about is students kind of starting to feel, in particular, given that there was that announcement of a delay to a return back in the fall, and then also here in early January, that students are starting to kind of feel disconnected from the school community. And so what I've done is reached out to our staff. I'm going to have a few different teachers help me out run whole school Zoom assemblies on a monthly basis. And the whole intent behind these are similar to the monthly assemblies that we had in person, but really meant to celebrate and connect our kids to teachers, to staff members that they haven't seen for a number of months, but also to one another, and also certainly to celebrate some of the achievements that kids are making in spite of all the challenges we all face at this point. And then finally, last year, it was about a year ago, I actually went to the Home and School Club as we lost one of our beloved, I believe they're ginkgo trees, out in front of our school to illness. Went to our Home and School Club and asked for some additional funding to partner with an organization called Our City Forest in hopes of having some trees planted here around campus. And unfortunately, we were delayed in actually getting those trees into the ground because of our closure back on March 13th. But I wanted to return to this. And so I've gone back to the Home and School Club. They have funded the project. And my hope and intent is to have these 30 to 35 trees actually planted by the community. I can partner with the organization. I can get their AmeriCorps volunteers to come out here and put 30 to 35 trees into the ground. But I think that also kind of misses the opportunity. I think it would be great to involve the community, our kids, and families in getting these trees into the ground so that as we all continue to live here in the neighborhood, we can see these trees that we planted continue to grow. And really the main reason behind trying to get these 30 to 35 trees onto our campus is that I think we really are fortunate that we have such a beautiful campus. And in so many ways, it's beautiful because we have really established trees. And so while I'm principal of the school, I feel like it's my kind of responsibility to be a good steward of the campus and in hopes of planning to make sure that it continues to look and feel like an inviting, welcoming campus where students and families want to gather, where we have shade in the spring and summer when we're all welcoming and you to school, and at the end of the day when we have our ice cream truck or out front, we want to make sure that the campus continues to feel the way it presently does for our kids now for future Barracudas. So I'm going to be working with our city forest on figuring out and our district about figuring out how and when we can actually start doing these community plantings, and maybe we can do them sooner rather than later under certain health guidelines. But I'll be sending out additional communications to the community about how you can sign up to participate in that. So it's exciting news and look forward to involving all of you in that. So materials distribution, I hope all of you are aware, we've kind of just, we elected to make a shift in how materials get distributed for your students. At the beginning of the year, we were really prioritizing students and teachers and families being able to have that face-to-face interaction as we work to build connections with one another. But that also kind of led to some logistical challenges for a great deal of our families, in that we had these very narrow windows where you would come to school so that you could get your materials. And we know that everybody's lives are busy in spite of us having to deal with the present stay-at-home orders. Everybody has job responsibilities. And so we want to make sure that we were responsive to the needs of our community. And so we kind of shifted our priority in making distribution easier for families. And so what we did is we shifted to having the distribution available out of our breezeway. Each teacher has a bin, it's labeled, and the breezeway is open from 7:30 a.m. until 6:30 p.m. We're going to continue to do that for the remainder of the year. We think that it just really allows families to come on your own time and get the materials that your child needs, and or drop off stuff and return it to teachers. Please make sure that you're paying attention to your child's teacher's communications, as they will be the ones who are updating you as to when you need to come and pick up new materials or when you need to drop off materials. So I received 3 submitted questions that I want to address. And the first one was, other districts across the country have opened already and have been able to stay open. Why hasn't CSD? I kind of alluded to this, that we currently are under the county health guidelines that we cannot open. I do not know what the governor's announcement today for his return to school for all plan kind of entails. It might entail some adjustments to the conditions in which schools can reopen. But the reason why CSD has not reopened to date is we are obligated to abide by the county health guidelines. And so because we are presently in the purple tier, we haven't been able to open. But please do understand and do trust that it is Dr. Andrews' priority and my priority to bring kids back to campus as soon as we can, because we all know that I think our kids have done remarkably well in making this transition and have shown a great deal of flexibility. We still all know that kids need to be here at school, that there's part of the experience of coming to school every day, interacting with peers and other adults, even just that walk to school or bike to school every day, those are important moments, and we want to make sure that we can restart those as soon as possible. Question 2 is kind of related to the rooming and zooming. So how much flexibility will we have to change from rooming or zooming option for our child based on our comfort level and current events and the environment? So flexibility really is one of the main reasons that this instructional approach was taken, because it allows for a great deal of flexibility. So not only does this allow for families who aren't comfortable with the return in red for their child to continue to be part of their classroom, but what it also allows us is that when a child or a family have to quarantine, this doesn't mean that that child is now going to be removed from their classroom for 14 days, 20 days, whatever the medical recommendation is in terms of isolation for that child. It doesn't mean that they're going to be disconnected from their class for that entire time. So what this allows is for families to be able to make wise, prudent, and responsible decisions for their children while still their child being able to maintain connection and gain instruction from their present teacher. So I would say, how much flexibility do you have? We have a lot of flexibility, and that's why this approach was selected. So question 3 is, when schools reopen, what safety measures will be in place? I've kind of talked about this in previous Principals Coffee and previous communications that I've sent out. There is a YouTube video from my Principals Coffee, I want to say back in November, that really kind of lays out what our Bagby specific safety plan entails. But let me just review some of the details. 1, all students are required to wear masks. Our teachers are presently practicing students wearing masks with all of their classes. So students are required to wear their masks throughout the entire day. We have the cohorting, so we're limiting the number of students that actually interact with one another. That reduces their chance of being infected. We have robust plans for hand washing and hand sanitizing. In each room, there are now automatic hand sanitizers inside the doorway. Every single time a student enters in through the doorway, they are required to use hand sanitizer. I also kind of talked about the different entrances we're going to be using at arrival and dismissal, and that the goal really is to keep kids from separate cohorts as separated as possible. So we're trying to maximize those entrance points, both near the cafeteria circle, our main entrance, and then also off of the Kirtner parking lot. And then I also kind of talked about the strategic zones that students will be able to do recess in, and that we're not allowing cohorts to intermingle, and that during that recess time, they will actually be assigned to a particular zone to play in for a week, and then we'll rotate through so that kids can definitely benefit from a variety of different activities, but also at the same time, we're making sure that we're maintaining that cohort integrity. So I just want to kind of wrap things up. As I alluded to before, the district has rescheduled its January board meeting or special board meeting to next week, next Thursday, the 14th, at 7 p.m. via Zoom. And the primary reason for the postponement was the impending announcement from the governor's office and not wanting to update the community prematurely, only to have to go back and revise things based on what the governor is coming out and saying. I also will be having another Principals Coffee in January to update all of you on what the governor says at some point today, and then also what the governing board decides in terms of our next steps on the 14th. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. For all of those of you who are not viewing this live, but are viewing via the YouTube link, feel free to shoot me follow-up emails if you have additional questions after watching this video. Thank you very much.